Before I start and share, I do want to, confess, as I was preparing this, I was convicted and challenged because I don't always have a biblical view of money. And I think what I share is nothing new, but it's hard to obey and follow because I think when it comes to money, and especially men, we want to own it, dictate it, and how we think we should use it. And I think we can think, oh, as long as I give, I tithe something, that's good. But the rest, I get to choose how I spend it and how I plan for it. And so, but that's not the way God sees money. And money is a big part of our lives. And so to say, this part, God, I can't surrender, submit, and follow you, I mean, that's counter to gospel and what he calls us. And so hopefully what I share is convicting, challenging, but ultimately it causes you to see differently how, money and how you use it and how the way God calls us to see it, and hopefully it challenges you and it hopes produce obedience to that as well. And so that's what I'm hoping for and praying for. So, here. So the outline is I'm going to go over a Bible verse, kind of the heart behind how we should, approach and deal money. I'm going to give 3 biblical principles that should really help us to guide and dictate how we should think about money, how we should use money. And then I'm going to go over kind of practical questions that we might have money and kind of address it. And then we'll have some discussion questions. So, okay, I guess it's in order. So how many times did Jesus talk about money in the Bible? Because it does address money a lot. It was 11 out of 40 parables, so that's 28%, which is a lot. Now, why did Jesus talk about money so often? Well, money was a common and significant issue. It's a reality in our lives. We need it. But it also reveals people's hearts, priorities, and relationship with God. So you can't really separate God and money because it's a big component of our lives and how we think about it, how we use it, how we plan for it. And then is it money itself bad or sin? No. But it comes down to your heart and how you deal with money. So the Bible verse that I wanted to share is Romans 12:2. There's the ESV, and I like the NLT. It says, don't copy the behavior and customs of this world, but let God transform you in a new person, but changing the way you think. Then you will learn to know God's will for you, which is good and pleasing and perfect. And this Bible verse is a kind of reference to, like, what is God's will, right? How do you know God's will for your life? Well, this Bible verse says, as you become closer to Christ, you will start to think like Christ and act like Christ. So the Bible doesn't tell you every single will for your life. No, it gives us principles, guidelines, but as you become closer to Christ, you will start to think like Christ and act like Christ. And that's kind of the heart behind how we should deal with money. Oh, wait, sorry. Okay, so there are 3 principles I want to share. So I don't think this is new, but God owns everything. Second one is how you spend your money does reveal your heart. And then money is a tool for God purposes. So let's start with the first one. So Colossians 4:16 says, for all things were created in heaven and on earth, visible and invisible, whether thrones or dominions or rulers, authorities, all things were created through him and for him. So we can see the first principle is God owns everything, and everything that you have comes from God, and so it becomes a stewardship. What you have, especially money, is you don't own it. It came from God, and how you steward it is the way you should really think about money. But a lot of times we don't think about money that way. We think about money as I earned it, I own it, and I get to use however I want to use it for, and a lot of times it's for yourself or for your family or whatever. And also the heart of stewardship is just not about giving. You could say I give a lot, I give tithe, but the heart behind it is managing what you resources, including money, that honors God. And so that part of that is also integrity, because you could say, yeah, I earn a lot of money and I give a lot of money, but are you doing it in a way that really honors God? And so it becomes a heart of stewardship, and connected to that is integrity. Are you managing, dealing money, earning money that reflects conviction that comes from God? The second principle is money reveals your heart. So Matthew 6:26, that says from the Sermon on the Mount is, for where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. Which means, what you treasure you can see, especially when you spend money. What do you really treasure? What do you value? If you spend a lot of money on yourself, then you can see that I treasure myself. If you like to save for the future, then you're kind of treasuring, okay, I have this plan and future that I want to look towards to. And so, what our money and what we do with it often follows which are we are worshiping, what we are really treasuring. Now, if you value your spending, what does it reveal about you and what you treasure? I think, Pastor Edmund said this before, I think a lot of times what you spend, and if you look at it, it does show, what you really treasure, what you really value. And so, money does reveal your heart. Now, the Bible talks about being generous with your money a lot. And why is that? First, God has been generous towards you. That's the reason why we should be generous with our money. God has been generous with you. He never held anything back. And so the question is not so much, how much should I give? But the real question is, how much should I keep? Because it's really, if it goes back to the heart of stewardship and God owns everything, it's not like I need to give a certain amount, but it's more like, okay, how much do I really need to keep? And the rest really belongs to God. And the third principle is from 1 Timothy 6:17. I teach those who are rich in this world and not to be proud and not to trust in their money, which is so unreliable. Their trust should be in God, who richly gives you all we need for our enjoyment. Tell them to use their money to do good. They should be rich in good works and generous to those in need. Always be ready to share with others. By doing this, they will be storing up their treasure as a good foundation for the future, so they may experience true life. So what does this mean? I mean, compared to all the world, we are pretty rich. And I think a lot of us will continue to make a lot of money. And so what does that teach us? Well, you can't take money to heaven, right? So what are we, and it always goes back to the first and second principle of God owns everything. And also, how you spend and use and think about money reveals your heart. So we're allowed to enjoy our wealth, right? There's not a sin to be wealthy, but don't put our hope in it. If that's what you're putting your hope and trust and security is, how much money you have, how much, wealth you have, how much wealth you could build for the future and your family, well, you can't take that with you. So if you're wealthy and you're meant to build God's kingdom, use it for God's kingdom and not to build your own kingdom, which is hard because I think we can justify, well, I need this, I need to plan for my family, I need a house, I need this and that. So it's hard to kind of think like, I'm not building my own empire, but I need to live here and it's costly. So these are things that's something I will also address later on. Any questions before I continue to go on any of these three principles? No? All right. So the first question, I think, a practical question is making a lot of money a sin? What do you guys think? No? No. Well, no. Because money is not inherently a sin. But it's our motivation, what we do with our money, right? It's always become a heart issue. Why are you trying to make a lot of money? What is it for? Is it for you? Is it to build for your future, whatever? Which none of those things are bad in itself, right? Because the Bible also talks about we should, plan for the future. We should be wise with our money, not be wasteful. And also, there were many rich people in the Bible as well. Job, Jacob, Isaac are all wealthy in the Bible and considered godly men. But they also didn't put their hope on the riches. That wasn't what they were doing. Another good example in the New Testament was Zacchaeus, a chief tax collector. He was very wealthy, and when he encountered Jesus, what did he do? He was rich on dishonest means, right? And so when he met Jesus, encountered Jesus, he actually pledged to give half his possessions to the poor and repay anyone they had cheated, including pay back 4 times he had given. So what did that mean? He didn't put his trust and hope on his riches. No, after he met Jesus, he wanted to put his hope and trust in Jesus. And that made him see the ways that he was holding on to his riches, the way he gained his riches, and wanted to correct that and do contribution for that. Second is, God cares more about my heart than what I do with my money, right? You could say, you know what? I really want to give, but I don't. But my heart's in the right place. Well, what does that mean? Well, it goes back to, I went over James last time. What is it good, dear brother and sister, if you say you have faith but don't show it by your actions? Can that kind of faith save anyone? So what is it saying? It's saying, if you believe it, you should actually do it as well, right? It's like you hear the gospel, God tells you what to do, but you don't listen. Well, is that actual genuine faith? I think James in the Bible say no, because and it's not like, I'm not trying to say faith, action, doing all this saves you, but if you are really in Christ, you really are trying to follow Christ and listen to him, then there should be produced action and obedience as well. So I think I said this. So the faith and works is always connected. It's faith and should produce works and obedience. Another one, I know I need to give, but how much doesn't matter as long as I give something. And this is kind of relation to kind of tithing, right? You can think about tithing. Oh yeah, I tithe, I give. But the amount doesn't matter, as long as I give something. Well, is that true? Well, in Mark, it addresses this where I think everyone knows what the poor widow gave, an offering. It was a very small amount, but it was all that she gave. And there was a rich person, and they gave large amounts. But it was out of really their abundance. They didn't give sacrificially or proportionally to what really they had, but they just give out of their abundance. And so it is true. And also reference the Old Testament, I think we hear about the 10%, right? In the Old Testament, there was a 10% given to the temple out of your produce. But there's also on top of that, in a yearly tithing for a festival, and then I think every 3 years there's also giving to the poor. And so if you calculate that, it was actually around 20% that people actually gave tithe. And so in the New Testament, Jesus doesn't talk about an actual percentage, like you should tithe this amount. But what does he focus on? He focuses on proportional, sacrificial generosity from the heart. And so, I don't want to say that's a certain percentage, but I think you can, if you read into that, it's probably more than 10%, because it's really sacrificially giving and generous with what you have. Actually, there was one more question that I wanted to go over. I think it was about investing and gambling. And actually, it was brought up because I actually visited Yuchen and Fabi, and then he said I should probably talk about this, which I think is really relevant today about investing and gambling. So is investing, and I put investing and gambling together because I think investing can sometimes seen as gambling, but I'll address each one. But investing, let's go start. Is investing a sin? No. Well, it depends on the heart behind investing, because even with the parables of the talents, you remember the 2 servants, they doubled what the talents they were giving. And so we don't know how they doubled it, but they probably did some kind of investing or something to double it. And so is investing wrong? No. I think the heart behind investing, but then it goes back to the heart. Why are you investing? Is it, and also I think the investing, there's different ways you can invest. I think there's a lot of risky investments. And so the heart behind investing is, yeah, why would you invest on risky stuff, especially if it's money that you can't afford to risk? So that also goes along with gambling, right? Is gambling a sin? It's a gray area, but it's also there's a heart behind your gambling as well. If you're gambling, small amounts for entertainment, I think that could be looked at as probably not a sin. But if you're really gambling large amounts, and it also goes back to the heart of the biblical principle of stewardship, yeah, if it's God's money, you should be gambling large amounts just for your fun or just for the thrill of it. And I would say no, that's probably a sin. And also, I think gambling and investing could also lead to greed. It could lead to addiction. And it could just lead to a consumption of just always thinking and desiring and taking up like so much of your time and mind and heart with investing and gambling. So I think it's very important to be aware of that and be wary of that. And it goes back to the principles of, yeah, are you being a good steward when you're investing or gambling? What is it revealing about your heart when you are doing that? And is that really advancing, that money for God and God's kingdom? And I think if you're honest about it, it's probably all of them are no. So I would say then it's not something that you should be doing. Okay, before we go to the discussion questions, any questions?